Yeah, someday we'll see. Yep. Yes, it is. I love it. Well, we shall see. Yeah. We shall see. All right.
Are you good? How are you? Continuing resolutions.
Okay, it seems to be 10 a.m. So, and I hear alarm going off at 10 a.m. So that confirms it. I'm going to call this meeting to order and first read something regarding the Open Meeting Act. In accordance with Section 84-1412 of the Nebraska Revised Statutes, a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is available for review and is located to my right against the wall, a large poster in this meeting room. If somebody would like to read about the Nebraska Open Meeting Act, which we are subject to. Having said that, before I do the call of order, I'm going to announce that we have Emily Turk to my left. She is an understudy for Wanda in serving NEFAB. Welcome to this meeting. And she's a recent hiree, state of Nebraska, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the meeting. Having said that, we'll do the call to order and roll call.
Mr. McGinnis,
Here.
Miss Anderson,
Here.
Mr. Bourne,
Here.
Mr. Henning, Mr. Karp.
Here.
Mr. King,
Here.
Mr. Miltenberger,
Here.
Mr. Oshner, Mr. Salim.
Here.
We have a quorum. One item before we go further, in the corner to my right by the door is a copy of the meeting agenda for anyone who would like to have that, as well as extra copies of the reports provided to us by staff. Agenda item number 2 are the minutes of the October 27th, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion and second to approve as so written?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any comments? If not, roll call.
Miss Anderson. Aye. Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Karp,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Miltenberger,
Yes.
Mr. Salim.
Yes.
The minutes are approved. Item number 3, forecast presentations. Which of you two would like to start?
All right. So I think we're gonna have a fun meeting here. So we sent our book out last week. You should have it, and let's kind of present our forecast for the next this fiscal year. Just some overview of the U.S. macroeconomic forecast. The economy grew about 3.2% last quarter of last year. Unemployment is still low. You have a very robust employment market both in the U.S. and in Nebraska. Nebraska unemployment rate is about 2.3% in December, and it's only Moody forecast of Nebraska unemployment will max out at 2.8%, but it's going to be in late 2026. So there will be a slight increase in unemployment rate in Nebraska, but it's still under 3% based on the projection of Moody. So basically all this add up to like the economy might come out to be a soft landing rather than in recession mode. That's what projected last year. Both services forecast good growth next year, but below trend, just so that inflation can cool down. Here's an overview of kind of Moody and ISS, GDP growth, very consistent up until 25, 26, 27. That's where they start to deviate a little bit. So it's an employment rate. We will get to 26, 27 forecast in October, but they're pretty similar for 2 years that we are dealing with right now. In terms of monetary policy, S&P, both services kind of expect them to hold the rate current level until mid-2024. I think most consensus now is the rate cut will not happen until earliest June. But that's kind of where the projection is right now. And Moody think that they will do a 3 rate cut in 24, 25 basis points each. In terms of inflation, both expect some decline, but not going to be fast. Expect about 2.8% year over year for this year compared to last. And if you look at quarterly, I don't know why S&P assumed very low inflation rate here. And that's a quarter over quarter annualized rate. But then it picked up again. So there might be something in there that I don't know what to do. But it will gradually decrease, but not fast like they would like. Because between 3 and 2%, that's where the most difficult part of the Fed will be. And here's the state coincidence index. See Nebraska red line here, kind of flat out, not flat out, but growth at a slower rate since July of 23, whereas because the U.S. keep growing, kind of established pattern early 23. So Nebraska is somewhat slower growth. It's maybe because we don't have the employment to make them go faster. Concerning trend here is, look, this is non-motor vehicle net taxable sales, so this is directly correlated to sales tax. Up until here, we kind of see a flat out, and the trend line is kind of going back, decreasing. So it's basically going back to this before pandemic level rather than stop fast increase in this whole from 2020 to the end of 2022 period, and then it's kind of start to go back to pre-pandemic level without stimulus and everything else. Non-farm employment, we still adding employment, but at a slower rate since beginning of 23. But just because our unemployment rate is so low, so. All right, PTET. So in the discussion of this forecast going forward, PTET play a major role in the projection. So PTET is what we call, it's a pass-through entity tax, which allow a pass-through entity to elect to be subject to Nebraska income tax. Partner and shareholder may claim a refundable income tax credit equal to their pro-rate or distributed share from the Nebraska income tax paid by entity. And Nebraska is one of the 2 states that retroactive all the way back to 2018. Colorado is the other one. So I worked through an example here. I put this in the book, but I thought I should mention it here. So the example is, let's say an individual X is Nebraska resident, which is Y and Z is the partnership where that individual X is belong to, and then Y and Z partnership decide to participate in the PTET program. And they pay $68,000 on their assumed $1 million in Nebraska taxable income. The partnership has to pay at the top Nebraska top individual rate, which is 6.84, but for the purpose of this, it just makes sense to round number. So when the YZ partnership make the payment, individual X gets $68,000 in Nebraska tax credit. When this individual file Nebraska income tax with their $932,000 distributed income, they have to add back the tax credit that they get to get the total get back to a total of $1 million in taxable income in Nebraska. By doing that, they get $68,000 on the credit when they file Nebraska income tax, so they can write it off on their tax liability. So why do they do this? Because Y and Z partnership now is allowed to deduct that $68,000 paid to Nebraska from its income which indirectly reducing that individual act federal liability by approximately $24,000, assuming a 35% federal income tax rate. So this passed just to get around the short condition, which is the $10,000 cap at the federal level for itemized deduction. That's what this is, and it should be net zero for Nebraska because we make them add back, same amount of taxable income, same credit. That's the theory, right? And that's the assumption in the forecast. So with that in mind, the forecast for year to date compared to the forecast that we did in October, we did not present the board with any information on the PTET. So the forecast back then was not in account for that at all. So sale and use tax, we can see that it doesn't really have any impact on PTET. So it's very much close to the forecast, about 7 million lower compared to the forecast. But then individual income tax, why it did not show me any note on the screen. I have note on the screen, but then it doesn't show up. So I'm going to work on my memory here. So individual income tax basically is showing 158 million higher, but I believe about 240 million of that was because of PTET on there. So without the PTET, you're going to get a lower compared to the forecast. Basically, we're running short of forecast without the PTET. Similar story on corporate income tax. We're running over about 670 million, 77 million compared to the forecast in October. 600 million of that is PTET money. And miscellaneous run about 11 million higher. So in total net, we're running 840 million higher than the October forecast. 845 million of that is PTET money.
So when you say it doesn't affect the revenue, that doesn't take into account you're getting that money earlier than you normally would have, which means you can invest that money and get a return off of it. So there is some financial benefit to the state for doing this.
Yes, there's miscellaneous interest on investment increase because of the general fund balance increase, which reflect that investment on the book. What I meant to say was it doesn't have a net impact on a tax liability basis. Yes.
Is that including a lot, when you say 845 million, is that like 2018, 19, 20?
Yes.
Is that the whole thing?
Yes.
And so it's
5-year retroactive.
it's a 5-year whack
Yes.
all at once. Okay.
And here's the table that if I take out the PTET for apple-to-apple comparison to the forecast that we put together back in October. So I back out 270 million here, 600 million here. So the difference is about 5 million. So the forecast is very close. They are real without the PTET problem. It's either a problem or a good thing.
So we should be feeling pretty good about it.
Yes. Yes, that's why I adjusted it back out.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Would there be any impact from a fiscal year standpoint?
Yes.
Like, so it's gonna
Yes.
mess up one year and carry over. Will that be a one-time thing, or will it always be like that?
Our guess now it's going to be a one. So that 845 million will be refunded. That's our belief right now. And revenue assumption is 35% of that will go out this fiscal year in April.
Yeah.
And then given the nature of a lot of this taxpayer are like high income earner, they might do it extension, which is in October. So that will have an impact on the cash flow, which I will get to in a couple more slides.
Oh, that's the hard question. How did you come to the 35-65 split?
Because it's better than 50-50.
Good. That's as clear as you can be, I guess.
Honestly, I don't. And here is, as of today, for the month of February, we're running about 18 million higher. Most of that comes from, so sales tax, again, very close to the projection. We are at 2 million. Individual income tax down by 13 million, corporate income tax up 11 million, and then miscellaneous 17 million ahead of total forecast. So we're running this month alone is 18 million. So if you account from October to February included, we probably run over the forecast by roughly 10 million or so. So here's the right forecast for 23, 24, given all the information I just laid out. Sales and use tax, we do see some decline, so it's a 30 million decline. Individual income tax declined by 104 million. Again, this is because there is a P-TET component of net about 30 million, if my memory serves me right, on this forecast. That's where the decline is. And then corporate income tax went up, that's 600 million included in there. Miscellaneous also forecast upward by 20 some million. So the total forecast called for 7.035 billion for this year versus 6.96 billion based on Moody data. The big difference, it's not big difference, it's very close. Between the two services, the individual income tax is the difference, and Moody assumed a lower rate of capital gain and personal income. So that's where the difference comes in. So if I take out the P-TET, which what I did here, the forecast called for a decline of 19 million, and then Moody is about 90 million. Most of that comes from corporate income, individual income tax. But we make a report in corporate income tax. So that's without the P-TET.
And that's baked into the sheet you gave us today.
That's the T-shirt sheet.
Yeah, that includes the fact that P-TET, those are
It
the
does.
actual forecast numbers with the effective.
The reason I separate out the P-TET adjustment is just for comparison purposes back to the October forecast. But the real thing is this, because that's what we're living with in the world of P-TET. 24, 25, it's a decline of 530, similar story. We get the money now, we have to refund it next year. So basically, if you look at so here's up 590, here's down by 530. So it's kind of offsetting each other for the two fiscal year, basically just because of that P-TET problem. And here's without the P-TET, up by 19 million, declined by 31 million services, income tax decline. Yes.
P-TET have any material effect in fiscal year 25, 26, or 26, 27?
It will, but the retroactive is done, and we have to assume that taxpayer will keep doing the same thing because the short thing will end in 2025. I put in the 26, 27 forecast in my book that assuming the federal tax stay the same, meaning they will keep the short thing and then everything else with it, which is a big assumption, but we don't know any data now. Right.
In terms of cash flows, though, you're expecting a lot of that to be reduction of.
On the P-TET issue alone?
Yeah, reduction of
Estimated payment.
estimated payments.
Yes. So going forward, if we don't have this retroactive problem, I use data from one other state, and they're similar size to us, and they're running about 150 to 200 million in P-TET money per year, and that's what we're living off. And most of that increase, what we did in our forecast specifically is there will be a reduction in estimated payment, just because this entity are making the payment on behalf of the shareholder, if you will, or the partners. So they will not have any obligation to make the payment. So in the projection coming up in the next few slides, you will see estimated payment decline, and there will be a slight increase in final payment. on individual and corporate income tax payment, which kind of offset that two thing. That answer your question? So net sales yield stock, going back to normal. It's still good growth, 5.75% for the next 2 years. Net individual income tax, you can see the forecast here, declined by 3.7% this year, and then another big decline next year just because of the PTET and the lower rate. When we build in the individual income tax, there's a rate cut next year, 5.64 this year, and then 5.2 next year, I believe. So that's all get built into here. So you get the PTET money go down next year, and then you also have the lower tax rate. Which brings to the withholding table. Withholding tax increased about 2% this year, but that decline next year, just because we will assume another withholding table change every January 1st to account for the lower rate. Final payment this year will increase by 59-60%, just because of the PTET money. How we quote the PTET money is coming from a partnership. We quote it in final payment for individual. If an S corporation makes the payment, it's going to the corporate income tax, and then it's likely we will all go out as an individual income tax refund. So if you take that out, the growth rate looks a lot like what we've been seeing projected for the last few years. Here's estimate payment. We actually have a decline for the next 2 years, both because of the tax rate and the PTET. So we assume it's going to drop to $300 million in that neighborhood for the next 2 years. Case in point, if I go back all the way back to that February sheet, which I might do that just for illustration purposes. So we project about 2.5 million. We got like 340,000 this month. So that's some real effect there. Refund, like I said, so 845 million in PTET money. We will assume it's going out 35% this year, which is on that 1.366 billion, and then 65 going next year, which brings that refund up to 1.73 billion. Net corporate income tax this year 1.351 billion. If we take out the PTET, that's a 2.7% growth, and then another 733 million next year. Keep increasing because of some of the PTET money got accounted for this. I think I put it in roughly 100 million in corporate income tax, I believe, and then 45 million in individual. Miscellaneous, practically pretty close, not too much there, about 300 million or so. So total net revenue this year, 7.03 billion, 6.9 billion for the two services, and then dropped to about 5.8 million give or take in 24-25.
Do you have that previous slide adjusted for PTET?
So PTET is over here. Without the PTET, it's
Okay.
1% higher and then 0.6% decrease.
Okay.
Then
Thank you.
keep in mind some of this decrease is because of the rate change rather than the economy is still great. I mean, so I have no concern on that. Just the change in the tax rate. So
Any other comments or any?
that's all I have here.
So to the board, any questions?
So this is a double math test for us, you know, and I think the old movie line about, nobody told me there was going to be math on this test, but it seems like we have to look at it and say, okay, how's the economy doing? That's one issue. The second issue is how are the rates changes going to affect the actual numbers? Third line is how is PTET going to affect this? So this is a real algebra problem.
That's exactly what we did on the forecast. We run the baseline, we adjust for the rate, and then we adjust for the PTET.
Okay.
What about the stimulus that's gonna come in?
The stimulus will be on the macroeconomic data itself. I did not consider the stimulus on the PTET itself.
Okay.
I did have one question for you on pages 10 and 11 in your books. And I know we're not here to forecast fiscal years 25, 26, and 26, 27. But since you have it in the book, I thought I'd at least ask you a question about it. Based upon the current law and all the assumptions that both S&P Global and Moody's puts into this on those 2 pages. And I'll just look at page 10 because they're about the same. When I look at the average of the fiscal year 23, 24, and 24, 25, those 2 columns at the bottom, the total net receipts, and I compare the total net receipts, the average for the 2 years, 25, 26, 26, 27, it actually shows a decrease.
Yes.
And the same is true on with Moody's too. Is that, well, what is the reason for the decrease? Because we're obviously used to having increase from year to year.
Because the income tax rate changed to a 3.99% in 2027. So it's 6.84 last year, 6.64 in the 24 year, and then 5.84 next year, and then 5.2, and then 34.5, and then 3.99 for the next 5 years. So the impact of the rate cut on individual impact actually, if you look at each of the individual components, it all go up except for individual income tax and some on corporate income tax. Corporate income tax rate also declined. So if you look at that, then sales tax still going up. Individual income tax kind of slowly decline just because of the tax rate.
Okay. Well, of course, when we do the budgeting, we're here just to, or the forecast, we're here just to do the forecast. We don't necessarily, other than citizens of the state of Nebraska, have to worry about if receipts are declining year to year, how does that affect the services that are provided by the state? That's the unicameral and the government, two branches of government. But I just want to make certain I understood why it was declining, because unless there's a black swan event or something unusual happens, we're used to it increasing year to year. Thank you.
So if there's anything, this assumes the baseline forecast with the tax rate cut. If deviate from the baseline forecast, if we have a economic boom or economic recession, whatever the case may be, then it will revise this number.
So let's go back to the math problem for a second. So how much of the number should we be looking at and saying this is because of the rate decline? What number did you guys use to figure it in? Is it
To do the rate?
Yeah.
I don't know that on top of my head, but when I build this, we lower the rate, we run do we have that on the back of the book?
Yeah. 52,
Page 52 on
our report. That's the rates, the difference just for the mail.
So it's most of this comes from LD 873 last year of fiscal note, but it's similar. It's not going to be the same for our number because when we did the fiscal note, it was different data set, different environment. So every time when we run the forecast, we rerun those numbers based on the latest tax year data that we have, which is 2022 tax year. So we basically what we did is we run a simulation on tax year 23, on tax year 22 data for roughly a million tax return, and then we run that same data with the new rate, and then we see the difference in percentage, and then we back it out of the rate baseline. Yes.
So that's the methodology. What's the number?
No, I don't know it on top of my head. It's an Excel file. I don't know. I bring it next time. I don't have it.
Okay.
But it's in the neighborhood, so here is the individual income tax rate for fiscal year 25, 26, about 230 million.
Yeah.
give or take.
And just to add on to what Walter was saying, that bill was in 2022, I believe. And then in 2023, the legislature also enacted LB 754. And that's another, for fiscal year 24, 25, another 250 million between individual income tax and corporate income tax with the additional rate reduction that was in that bill. And that increases going forward as the rate continues to decline. So like in fiscal year 25, 26, it's about 450 million, and 26, 27, it's just shy of 700 million of an impact just relative to income tax, individual and corporate income tax of that bill on top of the bill that they did the year previously, so.
So when we look out, are you assuming that incomes themselves are stagnant? Or are you assuming that incomes are rising as well? Incomes are rising at the same time that rates are going down?
Yes, the forecast, if without the rate change, is actually going up, right? But the rate cuts here, if you look at the percentage change in rate cuts, it's in the neighborhood of what, almost 50% from the top rate of 6.84 all the way up to 3.99. That's a significant percentage, 41%.
Ballpark, how much did you put towards stimulus? Stimulant, so,
Of the lower rate.
of receipts. So if we have higher income because we're now doing the big projects all over the state, we finally got funding going, how much funding is going to happen?
The stimulus all come from the national data forecast that we built.
So it wouldn't be
So it's not
Nebraska
outside.
specific.
No.
And your point would be that Nebraska's probably just now beginning to feel like the stimulus is kicking.
Exactly.
Unless, however, if you think it like that, then it needs to be considered as what is the baseline, right? If this is extra on top of that baseline, if the economy keep continue at 2.8% or 2.3% unemployment rate, then and the economy keep growing about 3-point-some% as GDP, then it doesn't matter how many big project it is. It's just replacing the completed project, basically, if you will. So if it's not on top of the baseline, then it's that counted for.
Wow, now we're deep into
Yeah.
Keynesian economics. Okay, that's too far. I'm not gonna go down that path.
Any other questions? If not, Keisha?
My laptop quit working 30 minutes before I came over, so I have to.
Improvise. Okay. I'll start at the beginning, I suppose. Okay. So this I include every time, obviously we know why we're here. The February meeting is usually just a quick update relative to what's changed since October. This year, there's been a lot that has changed since October. So this is fiscal year to date by month. This doesn't include February, but you can all see that Waffle went through the differences in December and January. And then this is the same information by category, and you can see obviously that the gross receipts for individual income tax and corporate income tax up here are considerably higher, and almost all of that, or even more than what's shown there for individual income tax is due to the PTEP payments. And then you can also see on individual income tax that the refunds have been running ahead of forecast by about 40 million, and they're a little bit more ahead of that in February, for February. So those are kind of the main takeaways from there. One thing I do want to point out, I know this is not as big of a magnitude of an issue, but in miscellaneous tax, as the discussion has gone, the average daily balance in the general fund obviously is much higher the past couple of months because of the additional PTEP payments. So we do have, I think it was about 2.2 billion average daily balance in January in the general fund. And at the October meeting, that was running around 1.5 billion. So there is a pretty significant difference, which obviously does affect miscellaneous tax with interest on investments. So our forecast does take into account that. And the other thing that's a little bit different about miscellaneous tax is this was an issue. I think it increased substantially in fiscal year 22-23 relative to the category that was miscellaneous adjustments. That was about 42 million of the total, which usually that's less than 5 million of the total. And this fiscal year to date, it's about, through February, it's about 27 million. So it's tracking to be a relatively larger amount than it has been in the past as well. It may track closer to 22-23 as compared to previous years. So that's also bumping up miscellaneous tax a little bit. Obviously, you can see it's through January, 11 million ahead of forecast, and it's up in February too, so.
You said that January and February receipts were running a little bit ahead. Is there something going on in those that would explain that, or is it just the economy's running a little hot?
Well, they seem to be, I mean, miscellaneous is obviously ahead
Yep.
quite a bit. And I mean, on net, I think the other taxes are relatively close. The only thing I've really noticed in particular is individual income tax refunds are a little high. So that's pushing individual income tax down potentially in February. They're higher than forecast, I should say, they are what they are. But then, you know, this difference in miscellaneous tax is kind of accounting for some of that difference.
Is it all interest, or is there anything else in the
It's not
miscellaneous?
all interest. Insurance premium tax is up also year over year. And I know we'll get to this later. One of the differences in our forecasts is in the miscellaneous tax category. Our forecast is a little lower in the second year relative to the departments. And part of that is because our insurance premium tax estimates of projections are not quite as robust, but that has been a tax that has been growing. And that's in the miscellaneous tax category, so.
So, it's insurance premiums are growing because there's more insurance being issued in the state of Nebraska.
I assume so, yeah.
Okay.
The value of such insurance. I mean, I know insurance premiums in general have skyrocketed, especially related to property insurance. And I believe the tax is assessed on the values of the policy, so premiums. So I think that's a huge driver there. And not all of insurance premium tax goes to the general fund, but a large portion of it does, so. This is kind of breaking it down by month. I don't want to be too repetitive of what Waffle already said. But these are the different categories by month as compared to the forecast. I don't know that I have additional comments on that. So these are the S&P baseline factors that were used for February forecast as compared to the October ones, and there aren't a lot of significant differences, and this is following in line with what the department said relative to without the PTET consideration, the forecast, there are not a lot of significant variables that are driving a change in the forecast from October, except the PTET provisions that were state specific. But if you look at the national baseline data relative to what was estimated in October and what's estimated in February for these, it is pretty significantly similar. There's slightly higher growth in GDP compared to October, a slightly higher projection for personal consumption and business fixed investment, and inflation expectations are slightly lower than the October forecast, but it's all in all, still fairly similar.
Except for the stock market.
Yeah, the stock, that's true. That was kind of the one variable in there that was different. There are considerably different expectations relative to the stock market. The growth in 2023 was higher than what was projected in October, but the growth going forward is potentially lower than what was estimated in October. So kind of offsetting offsetting projections there. So these are our forecasts. Turn to my notes. So our forecast, from the two services are extremely close. So I should have organized this differently, but the first column and the third column are both for 23-24. And you can see that there's just about $8 million difference between our S&P forecast and our Moody's forecast. And then in the second year, they're within $120,000 of each other for fiscal year 24-25. We did, the handout that I passed out, that I sent with the report, does show that if you account for the rate changes relative to the income tax, individual income tax and corporate income tax, if we calculate a adjusted growth rate relative to these two fiscal years, our forecasts represent, I believe it's about a 13% increase and then a 10% decrease in fiscal year 25, and that would be adjusted. That's the growth rate adjusted for the rate changes. It does not adjust for the PTAP provision specifically. So that is an adjustment that is not included in that particular growth rate. So one thing that I do want to point out as well, we factored in the PTAP provisions a little bit differently than the department did. We factored in that there would be approximately 40% of the amounts paid in refunded yet this fiscal year, and that there would be approximately 60% of the payments paid in refunded next fiscal year. So the timing of the cash flow is slightly different in our estimates, and when I get to the next slide, it'll show that too. But the other thing that is slightly different between our forecast and revenues forecast is that we factored in a higher percentage of that being refunds instead of a decrease in estimated payments. Now that, of course, doesn't affect the net, but it does affect potentially which category this shows up in, if it shows it up in the refunds category or just in lower gross. So that is one consideration that's slightly different. So this is the net effect of that relative to our forecast relative to the Department of Revenue's forecast. And you can see the biggest difference here is in fiscal year 23-24 for both S&P and Moody's. We are estimating lower individual income tax because there's a slightly higher percentage of refunds being claimed assumed in the forecast. And then our corporate income tax number is a little bit higher than the department's, which is a little bit of an offset. But you can see at the bottom, our overall difference is relatively almost negligible in the first year, and then in the second year, it's average 75 million of the two. So so those are kind of the main differences between the estimates that we're providing as compared to the Department of Revenue's forecast. I do think I explained that there's a little bit of a difference in our estimates relative to miscellaneous tax going forward, and that seems to be related to kind of the timing of the projected general fund daily balance and interest rates and those sorts of things, and then also the insurance premium tax, which I mentioned earlier. So those are kind of the main differences. I'll take any questions if you have any questions.
So I've raised overthinking to a lifestyle. So if this is not an appropriate question, I'm not offended. So in terms of an operative law situation, I guess I still have my appropriation experience that is running in the background. Essentially, we have a wash, despite the fact that we have $1 billion swing due to a timing issue that crosses the fiscal years. So if we were to, knowing that our forecast forms the basis of the general fund financial status and there's a revenue timing issue, how does and not to debate the policy, but just to make sure that if we do a forecast that reflects the actual numbers on timing, where we were to increase it by $500 million this year, then pull back that $1 billion in the next year and have this $1 billion swing, what does that do, if anything, to operative law in terms of meeting the balanced budget requirement based on that forecast status for what the general fund appropriation
Sure.
is?
I think the most obvious thing to me is that it's better that it's this way around versus
Correct.
the other
The other way would really suck. Yeah.
Because the first year is gonna decline
Right.
Substantially, and then you have an increase the second year. The state may end up having a significant cash flow problem relative to obligations, budgeted expenditures for the first fiscal year. But fortunately, this is happening the other way around, where the money comes in first and then it's gonna be. And the legislature's always budgeted to a 2-year biennial budget, not each individual year, which is also helpful. And it helps potentially, I suppose, that this is within the same biennium relative to regulating cash flow and making sure that the obligations of the state are covered. It is also, I think, the only thing that I could say is potentially like a implication is normally excess of certified receipts are transferred to the cash reserve fund. Cash reserve fund statute changes. That is something. It's got new provisions this year relative to how that would happen and what would be transferred. And I think that's still very uncertain. And but when you have a huge increase in one year and a decrease in the next year, certifying the amount that's over the forecast, the actual receipts that are over the certified forecast, doesn't take into account adjustments like the PTEP provision or those kinds of things. It's just actual. So those are all considerations, I suppose, relative to like the law that this would potentially affect. But I think those are really open questions at this point relative to the new cash reserve fund provisions.
Okay, and that's why I wanted
Maybe
to
that
just
was too much to say. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to verify is since we have the money coming in up front and we budget on a biennial basis, that we weren't triggering some sweep at excess by increasing it that then would require some legislative action to correct,
Yeah.
to sweep it back. And as long as we're not, since we're within the same biennium, as long as we're not creating a functional problem with our forecast by splitting it between the 2 fiscal years. I guess that was my
Yeah.
concern.
And I guess one of the things I would say is that it's only February and the legislature's in session, so if there was something that needed to be changed legislatively, there's still an opportunity to do that. But I mean, obviously, the forecast always has some legislative implications. But I mean, our actual receipts are actual receipts, so,
Yeah.
And can I ask a rhetorical question? I'm not sure who I'm asking this of, but isn't that kind of not our problem? I mean, and I understand it is as citizens, but as far as this group, I mean, if that were to happen, does it just automatically, is the trigger then that a legislative body or somebody else would be like, oh, shoot, we need to do something about it. I guess I don't know.
And that's why I was wanting to make sure is that if we look at the numbers and we were simply to make a forecast based on the numbers and the receipts as they came in, that wasn't inadvertently triggering something that created a bigger problem. Because we also then could consider saying, well, we just hold, and maybe we will, I don't know. We could always say steady as she goes. And we're going to have this big increase next year and a big decrease next year, but we know it's a wash, so we, in theory, could just leave a forecast relatively static and not change it, even though we have this $1 billion swing. I don't know that we don't have that policy, that discretion as a board.
But isn't it called the revenue forecasting board? I mean, so isn't it?
It is, and I guess I would say that, relative to the cash reserve fund provision that I mentioned, the forecast is already certified, so, that's just gonna be based on what the actual receipts end up being. So that's nothing that the forecast board would you set the forecast, but, the actual receipts will come in at the end of the fiscal year as they do. And, like I said, I think that this is, the forecast is what it is, and then the legislature has an opportunity to respond. So, that's
But this
their prerogative to respond as needed.
But this discussion has the effect of kind of saying, look, this is something somebody needs to look at kind of
Sure.
situation.
Keisha, what's the current cash reserve balance?
It's about 1.5 billion. There are a significant number of transfers out that are in statute that will take place yet this fiscal year to bring the balance down to about 860 million. But those transfers have not yet taken place. So the balance as of the end of, well, I looked, I think a couple weeks ago, it's about 1.5 billion cash in that account.
I do have a question or observation. I understand PTET and what the intent is. It's going to save certain Nebraska taxpayers federal taxes. I mean, that's what this is all about. In the 12 years I've served here, I don't recall dealing with a receipt event like this in such a magnitude, such large dollar amounts. Is this rather unusual based upon your history here?
I would say it is. I mean, the only thing that I can think of that is somewhat comparable is in the pandemic year when the filing deadline was delayed until July. And we had, I think that was just a little shy of 300 million that flowed from out of one fiscal year and into the following fiscal year. But other than that, I mean, to have this kind of a magnitude of a legislatively creative event, I think, or relative to the timing is a little bit different than what I've seen. Anything to add?
Would you agree in a year and a half or 2 years to come back at a future meeting and tell us if your forecast, which forecast was the most accurate? Because there's some differences.
I tend to forget what I did right after the meeting.
Kind of hard to follow that. Just because it's such a unique event, and probably there may not be one exactly like this in the future, but there clearly will be other things that come up 5, 10, 15 years from now that we can't even imagine. It'd be kind of interesting to kind of see how accurate your forecast was and to use that knowledge the next time something
if
rather
this happens
unusual
again.
comes up.
Yeah, because I do think relative to the estimates of the timing of these refunds, I think it is very difficult to have data. Wafu, I think would agree that it was difficult to know how much to factor in. And, once we have some experience with this provision, something similar in the future, we would have at least a basis of comparison to know how the timing is really going to be affected.
Thank you.
But one thing we can do better in October is that we will know exactly how much of that 845 million get paid out in this fiscal year.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a way that we can track how much of PTET money get refunded back out. So whatever not claimed in this year, we will adjust that 35-45 ratio at the time of fit when it comes to total.
So you'll be able to address that at the October meeting.
Yes.
Right. Board members have any other questions?
And actually, if I might, I want to add one more thing is that, so I went to some of this conference and what different states have different experience with PTET. Rhode Island is the first one of, I don't know if they're the first, but one of the first states that doing this PTET. There in Connecticut, probably. So what they're seeing is not every penny it will be refunded back out. So the 45 million might not get all claimed, just because some you might have some out-of-state people, some not picking up, they won't care. So there will be some people who will not claim the PTET money back out. Rhode Island claim is to be 3 or 4%. Some other states have 5-6%.
But there's really little financial reason not to claim it,
That is
except
correct.
if
So
you have a bad account.
Yes. But it should push close to 100%, but it will not get to 100%. I mean, we don't know that. But how much of it, I don't know.
Can I ask a question about this sheet?
Sure.
Sure. I was just noting in the 23-24 timeframe, the average between the Legislative Fiscal Office and the Nebraska Department of Revenue specifically in individual income tax and corporate is fairly different. I mean, actually quite different. And is that those assumptions of the 35 versus 40%? That's how big that assumption makes a difference?
Some of that maybe,
Yeah, some of it certainly is, but I don't know how much of it exactly.
I just thought it was interesting that there was quote unquote so far apart. They seem further apart than usual.
Yeah, they are, and I mean, you can see on this slide that the individual income tax, we're over 200 million lower than what the department is estimating or forecasting. And then in corporate income tax, it's, 175 or so higher. So I think on the individual income tax side, at least a large portion of that is because our forecast assumes a higher percentage of the PTET refunds going out yet this fiscal year relative to next year.
Good question. Any other questions? If not, I want to thank Rafu, Keisha, both of you and your respective staffs for all the hard work that you put into these reports. Very, very helpful. Makes our job much, much easier. Thank you again. This is the part of our meeting where we open it up for each board member to talk about their local communities, the state, whatever they have on their mind that is forecast related. So if we will, John, we'll start with you at your end of the table.
Sure. Economy strong. Lots of projects continue to try to get underway in rural or western Nebraska, especially the central part of the state. I think probably the regulator, if you will, or the limiting factor on a lot of the economic growth is simply availability of labor to get the projects underway. I think there's a lot of businesses that would like to expand, a lot of opportunity for some of those investment dollars to start flowing, but there just simply isn't the workforce to be able to get the projects going. So a lot of the really large, I would call them infrastructure, large investment projects that are in our area are getting strung out in terms of their timeline because of the ability to get the people to actually get them underway. So I think, again, employment is going to be the limiting factor on keeping the growth going. But other than that, things seem fairly positive. And obviously, there's differences in income experiences. So for high income earners, I think they're feeling like it's a real barn burner. I think lower income families, again, continue to feel the pinch of increased consumer prices. And while that increases are slowing, the increased consumer prices and the impact of inflation on working class families that maybe don't necessarily show up as much as an impact in our general fund receipts, but they still have and feel that economic impact. So I think it's kind of a bivalent experience in central Nebraska in terms of your economic perspective.
Thanks, John. We'll go to the second John.
John, too.
John, too.
I probably could just save you all time and say same thing I said last time and move on. But construction world, non-residential spending has dropped a little bit over the last year, but when factoring in residential total construction, this is nationwide, spending increased about 0.4%. November, manufacturing construction slowed, but looking for a huge spike later in 24. Permits nationwide have dropped, but the man hours are holding, which tells me that smaller projects have been dropped off, but the bigger projects are still going. So the 6-person job might not be doing it for exactly what John said. Maybe they're waiting and getting everything, but the bigger jobs are going. So the man hours are doing, I mean, that's my best guess. Talking to Smart Techs, the AIA index is down as far as billings, but their firms and most of them in the Midwest are still busy with good bookings for the year ahead. He agreed with me thinking that the smaller projects somewhat slowed down, but the bigger are still plugging away, which could be it. Looking like an increase about 6% in construction costs in 2024. Same issues as before in large electrical apparatus like big switchgear and transformers, along with any imports of electronics, which everything If you're an electrician, it's great. If you're everybody else, it's probably not great, but the supply chain's still having issues with the electronics and controls, that type of stuff. Still busy in the Midwest. Looks like a lot in the pipeline as far as construction work, exactly like what John said, though there is some softness. There is a little bit of unemployment right now in the construction trades, but I think we're just waiting from one job to start to the next job, I think is what's going on. Residential, even though the newspaper talks about how bad residential is, residential from people I'm talking to is holding their own. One contractor I talked with stated that really in the area of $700,000 to $800,000 homes is having a little softness, but this employer is putting on several more crews to handle the work already there. Or already assigned, I should say. Manpower is always an issue lately when you have this boom and bust scenario. Lincoln is starting to work on the new data centers. I drove by it. They're still doing dirt work over there. So they'll start putting in infrastructure probably August, something like that. So that job would take about 350 electricians. Lincoln does not have 350 electricians available. It won't happen. So it's going to be a struggle. As I reported someplace else, and Zach, you might remember it. In the old days, journey people journeyed. Journey people aren't journeying the way they used to. In other words, the way we were brought up is different than the way our kids were brought up. So it's going to get kind of interesting, I think. Prefab is something and again, I wrote this yesterday and I was driving out, there was 7 semi-trailers full of prefab equipment. They are looking for all ways to do it, and it's all crafts. The Google sites, their infrastructure is being built in Wisconsin and shipped down semi after semi. So you have more semi-truck drivers and pilot cars and all the rest of it. And everybody's looking for a bigger, cheaper, faster way of putting things together. And the faster is the key. It's certainly been going on a while, but it's sure getting a lot more interesting. As John said, outstate work is certainly on the increase, and that's going to prove to be interesting again for manpower. So decent, some blips, not bad. Same as last time.
If I may ask you a question, based upon your knowledge and experience in the Omaha market, or even statewide for that matter, if you were comparing the number of skilled tradespeople, electricians, plumbers, HVAC, today that are out there doing the work to 5 or 10 years ago, what do the numbers look like? Has there been decline?
Straight up.
It's increased.
Steam fitters in Omaha bought a Kohl's department store for training centers. I mean, the training has just gone through the roof. My group in Omaha, the one I was associated with, when I started, had 500 people. They're at 2,600 today. The training has just gone through the roof of all kinds. But what I'm finding kind of fascinating is not everybody stays. You started out in the old days as an apprentice, you worked your way up, you became a journey person, maybe a foreman, superintendent, whatever. In today's world, they're taking a lot of, I guess the term would be helper type deal. So now you're taking big class of apprentices, you're taking helpers. A lot of these people, hey man, I don't want to do that, And so they'll stay for a year, make some money, and down the road they go. So in the old days, we didn't get that coming and going. It was mostly just all staying in it. Once you did that much time, but the numbers are big. The numbers are still going up. Projections I saw, and I wish I wrote it down, the projections I saw, we're hitting the baby boom with construction hard. They're dropping out. If you look at an actuarial study for the pension funds for the different groups, there's nobody that stays past 62. I mean, there's a couple, there's a couple that leave early and a couple that stay past 62, but 95% of the people all retire. And that cliff is in 5 years. We're going to fall off the cliff. We're going to need a lot of people, and it's not just for the boom. So.
Thank you. Steve?
I could say I just agree with the Johns because that's pretty much what, if I'd said the same thing as I did last time, it would be great. And workforce is the problem. They're just, and I think we've been saying that for a long time. Only thing I note in the Omaha area, I think everything's basically humming along. The cost of food continues to rise at a rate that I think is not even as much, it gets reported, but it's even farther along the lines than it is. That's partially being offset by the fact that natural gas prices have basically dropped 50% from where they were last year this time. So you're looking at a situation where those heating bills and then it's been a warm winter, that's very stimulative to the economy because you don't have as much out at the end of the month to pay your gas bills. So the inflation is getting offset by the deflation in commodity. One set of commodity prices going up is being offset by another set of commodity prices going down. So that's my only observation at this point.
Well, I think something that has changed from the last time we talked is just a stability in rates. And I think that's really helped kind of take out some uncertainty from people's minds in terms of moving forward with projects, knowing that rates are going to be at least a lot more stable than they were last year. So I've definitely seen a change in customers' perceptions there. Liquidity seems pretty steady amongst customers, which is good because they've been declining for a while. We've had some tougher ag renewals than last year before last with commodity prices, but still a lot of equity that those producers can work with. So able to move forward. So I think a lot of, as far as Western Nebraska, very positive outlook for 2024, and especially when you look at harvest or crop projections and things like that, and hopefully coming out of a little low spot on the commodity pricing cycle.
Thank you. I'll just go ahead and now talk about the central Nebraska, Kearney in particular. Not much change from the previous meeting. Unemployment still at 1.8%. We do have, in terms of building permits and construction activity, almost two worlds in Kearney. One is on the residential and the multi-unit side, and the other is on commercial. I'll talk about residential multi-unit first. In calendar year 23, we had 50 single-family home permits come in. And I went back 27 years of data, and that's the lowest it's ever been. The average in the 27 years was about 100. So you can see everything slowed down an awful lot on the residential side. Multi-unit, about the same. We had 46 units in building permits last calendar year, and 89 was the average. So you may wonder, why is that happening? Because Kearney is still growing. The population, and it's approaching 35,000, is still growing. Businesses are growing too, but lack of labor, which we talked about, high labor cost as well, materials, and high interest rates. We've gone on the planning commission now 2 meetings without any applications at all. And I've served on that committee for a number of years, or the board for a number of years, and I can't remember any time where we didn't have any. So there clearly is a slowdown on the residential side. And of course, then we in the city say, well, where are these people going to live that we're trying to recruit into Kearney? We don't know the answer to that question. I know on the planning commission, we're looking at a lot of different ways to get more living units, including alternative development units, ADUs, I believe is what they call, where you can actually have a living unit over a garage or in the backyard or in the basement. But clearly there's a demand for living space, not just in Kearney. I suppose it's everywhere, but we're not having the building boom that certainly Omaha is having. And I read in the Omaha paper yesterday about the tent city that are growing in Omaha because people just can't find places that they can afford to live. Now, we don't have that in Kearney. At least I don't think we do. But I'm not certain I would even know unless I knew where to drive. So that's a concern, I think, right now for Kearney is how do we continue to develop residential living units for people that want to move to the area. On the commercial side, it's a whole different story. We have a lot of activity going on in Kearney. We've got the $34 million sports flex center that'll open up in about a year, 210,000 square feet. They'll be putting a roof on that shortly. And it's a sports complex where you'll have volleyball courts, pickleball courts, track, whatever you can imagine. And we have they have booked out as far as 2029 for that in terms of tournaments and people wanting to use it. So that's moving ahead quite well. We have 2 new cancer centers that'll be opening up in 2025. There's development along the expressway, commercial development, interstate, North 2nd Avenue, mall redevelopment, UNK. So we have an awful lot going on the commercial side. What we lack right now is on the residential side. And that's my report.
Well, I'll be brief just because I don't think we're making a lot of changes here because of economic factors, and maybe just reiterate something that John had brought up a bit ago. I don't know that it's that important that we get the ratio correct on which taxpayers are going to claim this year, but I do think it's critical whatever we decide on for 24, we make sure we get the full difference for 25 and not that's where we're going to create a structural problem for them more so than anything else we do here today.
The only thing I would have to add in the Omaha market to what John and Steve mentioned is that in residential development, we have a lot of developments that are basically fully developed, except they're waiting on power. OPPD is way, way, way behind. There are lots of lots that are just waiting. They're sold, got under contract, and they're waiting for power.
Have you heard if it's the direct burial lines or if it's the transformers? I've heard the transformers.
That's what we're hearing is transformers.
They're getting 20 a month and 2 houses feed off a transformer. So that add that up pretty quick. That's, and we're making it up 60 houses, but they can only power 40. They're in a hole and they can't catch up.
Yeah, it seems almost like they went to just-in-time ordering on those and didn't factor in the growth rate.
When you read about cybersecurity and you do that, if they lose 3 big transformers in the country, power company transformers, powerhouse transformers, we're in this world hurt.
Yep.
Because it's not gettable. It's just not gettable. It's fascinating. And those backyard transformers, it's all the way up.
Well, thank you for all of your comments and input. Before we go to the next agenda item, I just wanted to ask a general question for all the board members. A couple of you brought up the issue of the stimulus as to whether or not it's been effectively baked into the forecast. I just was wondering, does anyone feel strongly one way or the other that it hasn't been? Or anyone have any thoughts on the stimulus?
Well, I don't think we bake it in based on Nebraska. I think we've seen that all the way along since we've done since we've had stimulus, and I know that's a difficult thing to do probably, because they're getting all the data nationally, but I don't think we think about it in terms of what's going to happen to tax receipts in Nebraska in a way that we could.
For what came into the state, do you know how much has gone? I know some of it went directly to local governments and other entities, but do you be tracking what at least has come into the state has gone back out?
Yeah, through the combination of all of the federal laws, starting with the CARES Act, and there was a Appropriations Act in December, and there was ARPA, and there was the Families First, and so all of these different various acts. Yeah, it was I think around $22 billion of funds that came into the state of Nebraska. And that was distributed through a lot of different mechanisms. I mean, obviously there were the economic stimulus payments that went directly to individuals. There were the PPP loans. I think Nebraska was one of the highest in terms of accessing PPP loan funds, and that was well over $3 billion. And then there was funding that went directly to state and local governments through those acts. The state of Nebraska had $2 billion of, if you add $1 billion from CARES and $1 billion from ARPA, that was at the discretion of the state to spend. And then different local governments also received funds, subject of course to those restrictions under those two acts. And then in addition to that, there were specific programs that were enhanced by the federal government, unemployment insurance, education funding. There were several different pots of funding that came through the Department of Health and Human Services that were used for specific services under those acts. So I don't remember the breakdown of all of the categories off the top of my head, but it totaled about 22 billion from the when the CARES Act was passed in April of 2020 up through 2022, early 2023.
Do you know how much we're still sitting on?
Well, most of those funds have expired. So all the CARES Act funds have been distributed, and I think the last usage was December of 2022. And of that 22 billion, I think 12 or 13 came from the CARES Act. So those have been distributed. There is a little bit of ARPA money that's yet to be distributed. I think like of the $1 billion that the state was allocated under the fiscal recovery funds. I think at last check, 800 million or so has not been distributed yet. So, I mean, but they're working on expending those funds for those programs. As far as the state and locality money, the local government money, I don't have a good sense in terms of how much has been used and how much has not been. They do have a little bit more time to expend those funds, but there is a fairly large percentage of the funding that has been distributed and use is no longer allowed under the federal law. It's expired. So.
Okay. Hearing no other comments, let's go to our next agenda item, which is why we're here. And that's to do the forecast. So we'll do agenda item number 5, which is the blue sheet. Fiscal year 2023, 2024.
We're gonna do all of them, or?
Well, I'm sorry, we're going to do the sales and, what would you want to do? Usually we do sales and use tax first.
Yeah, let's do it.
We're just doing it right time.
Yeah.
Steve, thanks for keeping me focused.
Ben on that. Definitely a different time. Sorry.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Keisha, you want to just kind of
Oh, I'm sorry.
narrate it?
The high is 2,510,000,000.
Thank you.
The low is 2,488,000,000, and the average is 2,499,714,000.
I move that the forecast for sales tax be set at 2.5 billion.
Second.
We have a motion and second for 2.5 billion. Any comments? Not roll call.
Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Karp,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Miltenberger,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
It's the fun part, right?
Motion carries. We will now move on to the individual income tax.
It's like a vote early, vote often.
Yep.
That's a 2, right?
Yeah, that's 277, 275, 900, 850, 750.
Okay, the high is 2,900,000,000, the low is 2,745,000,000, and the average is 2,797,429,000.
I move 2,800,000,000.
Second.
We have a motion and second at 2.8 billion. Roll call, count first. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Karp,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Miltenberger,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Motion carries. Now we will combine, if the board agrees, the corporation and miscellaneous taxes in the next estimate.
Just you can see in this math test there.
Public is scared.
Yeah.
350.
I forgot the one.
You do miscellaneous. Can you do miscellaneous?
Do what?
Miscellaneous.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, the high is 1,700,000,000, the low is 1,350,000,000, and the average is 1,452,857.
Take out the 1.7 and see where it goes.
Lowers the average to 1,411,000,000.
I'd move 1,400,000,000.
I'll second that.
Can you repeat that? Sorry. 1,000,000,004
400.
even. Okay. So that would be the corporate income tax.
Yep, unless you wanted both.
No, just one. We'll do one at a time. So we have a motion and a second for 1.4 billion corporate income tax. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Karp,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Miltenberger,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bourne.
Yes.
Motion carries. Now we'll do miscellaneous.
Okay, the high is 330 million, the low is 300 million, and the average is 317 million, 143,000.
Mr. Chair, I'd move 320 million.
Second.
We have a motion and second for 320 million. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Miltenberger,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Carp.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The total is 7,020 million for fiscal year 23-24.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the 23-24 forecast for $7,020 million.
Second.
We have a motion and second for 7,020 million. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Miltenberger,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Carp,
Yes.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Motion carries. Now we'll go to fiscal year 2024-25. Start with the sales and use tax.
The high is, yeah, very, very consistent. The high is 2,625 million, the low is 2,560 million, and the average is 2,597 million.
Mr. Chair, I move 2,600 million.
Second.
We have a motion and second for 2,600 million. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Miltenberger,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Carp,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis.
Yes. Motion carries. We will now do individual income tax.
Thanks for being patient. It's a cool watch.
This is going to sound incredibly snooty, so I'm embarrassed to say it, but I got it at a watch store in Prague. So that sounded really weird in a horrible way, but that's where it's.
It is what it is. It is what it is, John.
It's still cool.
It's still cool, yeah.
The high is 2,300 million, the low is 2,200 million, and the average is 2,229 million.
Mr. Chair, I move 2,230 million.
Second.
We have a motion and second for 2,230 million. Any discussion? Seeing none, hearing none, roll call please.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Karp,
Yes.
Mr. Keen,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Miltenberger.
Yes.
Motion carries. We will now do together the corporate income tax and miscellaneous taxes.
The high is 750 million, the low is 735 million, and the average is 739 million.
I move the corporate forecast be set at 740 million.
Second.
We have a motion and second for 740 million. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Karp,
Yes.
Mr. Keen,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Miltenberger,
Yes.
Mr. Sleen.
Yes.
Motion carries. We'll now move on to miscellaneous income.
The high is 280 million, the low is 265 million, and the average is 272 million.
We'll move 270 million, 270.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second for 270 million. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Karp,
Yes.
Mr. Keen,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Miltenberger,
Yes.
Mr. Sleen,
Yes.
Ms. Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The total for fiscal year 25 is 5,840 million.
I move that the 2024, 2025 forecast total be set at 5,840 million.
I'll
Second.
second.
We have a second. We have a motion. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call.
Mr. Karp,
Yes.
Mr. Keen,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Miltenberger,
Yes.
Mr. Sleen,
Yes.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bourne.
Yes.
Motion carries. And let the record note that there was no disagreement on any votes today.
Well, in that case, can I read?
Draft is closed. All done. Thank everyone for your forecast and your input. Appreciate that. We have a few more items to cover before we adjourn today. The next would be to set the date of our next meeting. October 31st seems to be a date that everyone indicated their availability. And so the question came as to the time, and I've had at least one request to have a morning meeting. So my question to the board is whether a 10 a.m. like today would work on that date. Okay, I don't have anyone saying no, so.
Actually, it does conflict with the meeting I've got.
The morning or the day?
I've got an University Foundation meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning and then it's two committee meetings. There's a break. So 1 o'clock works actually.
1 o'clock would work well, and that would work for you, Zach. Okay, so 1 o'clock, We would like to have a motion and second to set that meeting date, 1 o'clock for October 31st.
So
Second.
We have a motion, second, any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes?
Mr. Miltenberger,
yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Carp,
Yes.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Motion carries. 1 o'clock, October 31st, 2024 will be our next meeting. Item number 8 is public comment, because we're covered by the Nebraska Meetings Open Act. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board. Does anyone present like to address the board? If not, then I will close that. Thank you. Item number 9 is other business, and at this point, I'll defer to Keisha.
Okay, thank you. This is an opportunity for all of us to thank Wanda McNally, who has been with the fiscal office since, 43 years or so. And she's been clerking the board meetings for the forecasting board since at least 2002. I think on a handful of occasions before that. So she's an integral part of our office. We're going to miss her very much. But she will be retiring later this year, probably before the next forecast board meeting. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank Wanda and tell her how much we appreciate everything that she does for the board and for our office. And that's all I have right now.
And
Congratulations.
And as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, Emily will be replacing Wanda, which is, and we're happy to have you here as well. I have been asked by the board to be its spokesperson at this point to recognize Wanda's role in the success of NEFAB. I'm not quite certain when we started working with NEFAB, and I understand NEFAB is just one of many responsibilities that she has, but for us, on these days, and in planning for these meetings, she's extremely, and has been extremely important. I've been here 12 years, and she was among others to help me get acclimated when I first joined this group. She's always been available by phone, by text, by email. She was instrumental in helping me plan the retirement of two very important people here who were with the LFO, who are here today, I believe. I just want to, on behalf of the board, thank you for your contributions and everything that you've done. You helped keep us focused when we were having our meeting. You've done an excellent job as it relates to the minutes. You got us paid, which was very important. And you're just a good person to talk to whenever, at least I've had any questions about what I should or should not be doing with NEFAB. So I hope that you enjoy your retirement. I know you will. I know you've been thinking about it because you've shared it with me in the past. I'm just glad that you're doing it at a time that you can still travel and enjoy the next life's journey. So please acknowledge yourself in terms of the contributions that you've given to all of us. Thank you. Now, if anyone else wants to say anything, you certainly can, but at this point, what I'd like to do is to see if there's anybody in the audience that would like to make any comments regarding Wanda. Yes, we have a familiar person in the back.
Don't worry, I'll save the good stuff when you retire.
Okay.
My name's Mike Keller. I was director of the fiscal office since 1983, retired in 2018. Wanda, I'm forever grateful that you finally relented and took the job of clerking this committee. If I recall correctly, you were reluctant, and I think I just kind of wore you down. I don't know if threats were involved or anything, but I just don't remember that far back. But I am forever grateful. Highly organized, in terms of this process publicly, but also behind the scenes. And I think you probably know me well enough to know that this function was extraordinarily important in my mind, personally and professionally. And it was very instrumental in a number of things that go well beyond this room. Right? So having someone like you, as dedicated as you are, was invaluable. I am forever grateful. And I did prowl around the office a little bit. I'd love to picture all the grandbabies. It's great. So congratulations, and I thank you very, very depth of my heart. Thank you.
It's been a while since I've been up here. The only thing Wanda didn't do was that our first meeting, and I said, I don't think we need to send those reports out in that mail early on. Didn't realize what a problem that was. That was my first foray, but I just reiterate what Mike said. Thank you very much for all your work. I always kind of laugh when I retired. If you remember in the movie, The Titanic, when that older lady passes away and she's the last one going up the stairs. One is now that one in terms of the fiscal officer. She's like the last one in our office. Welcome to our world. It's great. Sleep till 8. Don't have to get up. I recommend it for you. Thank you very much. We appreciate all your years.
Thanks, Tom. Jerry Dykert, who was chair before I took over and served on this board for many years, had originally planned to be here, but Jerry is retired right now. And he got a hold of me yesterday and said that he didn't realize how much planning, medication shots he would have to take a 2-week cruise to South America, which he'll be taking soon. So that's what he's doing today. He's preparing for it. And he said, Wanda, you're going to love the retirement, just like he is enjoying retirement, but he wishes you the best. And I wanted me to convey to you how important you were to his success in terms of serving on the board. So hopefully he said when he comes back from South America, he'll visit with you. So thank you again. Now, again, this is your last meeting unless a special meeting is called, which we hope will not be the case. Anybody else have anything else?
Does Wanda have any comment?
Wanda, yes.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. You're all wonderful people. I was very intimidated when I first started to do this, yes, but everyone has always been very easy to work with, put my mind at ease, and I appreciated that very much. I'll miss you. Kind of.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Hearing no other comments from the audience or the board, I guess it's, yes. Did I see someone? Oh, okay. You're just pulling your hair back. I thought you were. That's okay.
So,
We need a motion and second to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Roll call.
Mr. Keen,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Miltenberger,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Bourne,
oh, yes.
Mr. Carp.
Yes.
Motion carries. Everyone drive safe and thank you for all you do.